Good evening. A week that will be remembered by history began on Monday with a walk across Lafayette Square that tested the bounds of presidential power. President Trump's decision to visit St. John's Church and the use of force to move out peaceful demonstrators, it sparked outrage from Americans across the nation who have protested the killing of George Floyd by a police officer. According to some reports, Attorney General William Barr personally ordered law enforcement officials to clear the area, and his role in the militarization of the federal response is now under increasing scrutiny. The president has been dismissive of critics, from leading members of the clergy to Republican senators to his former defense secretary, General James Mattis. But he remains defiant and buoyed by economic numbers on Friday that show the unemployment rate dropping to 13.3% in May from 14.7% in April. The president also invoked Mr. Floyd's name at the White House on Friday.
Hopefully George is looking down right now and saying there's a great thing that's happening for our country. There's a great day for him. It's a great day for everybody. This is a great day for everybody. This is a great, great day in terms of equality.
Former Vice President Joe Biden later responded.
George Floyd's last words, "I can't breathe. I can't breathe," have echoed all across this nation and, quite frankly, around the world. For the president to try to put any other words in the mouths of George Floyd, I frankly think is despicable.
And in Minneapolis this week, there were calls for sweeping change at Mr. Floyd's memorial service. Here is the Reverend Al Sharpton.
The reason we could never be who we wanted and dreamed to be in is you kept your knee on our neck. What happened to Floyd happens every day in this country, in education, in health services, and in every area of American life. It's time for us to stand up in George's name and say, get your knee off our necks.
Joining me tonight are four reporters who have been covering this American moment. Jonathan Martin, national political correspondent for the New York Times. Amna Nawaz, senior national correspondent for the PBS NewsHour. Paula Reid, White House correspondent for CBS News. And Pierre Thomas, chief justice correspondent for ABC News. Paula, you join us tonight from the White House. You were at the White House when the president made that decision to walk across Lafayette Square. What drove that move inside the West Wing? Was it a response to reports that he was in the White House bunker on Friday night, or was it a deliberate flexing of executive power?
A little bit of both. There was a feeling inside the White House that the president was being perceived as weak, that he was, as you noted, hiding in a bunker, and he wanted a demonstration of strength. And he also wanted to show support for this historically significant church that had been a part of it that had been set on fire the night before. But it was so remarkable because just a few yards from where I am here, you had the president in the Rose Garden saying that he supported peaceful protests, talking about law and order. While a few yards this way, they were using flashbangs and pretty aggressive tactics to clear peaceful protesters from Lafayette Park so the president could walk across and have what is effectively a photo op in front of this church. So the president really stepped on his own message of showing strength and support for law and order and preventing any sort of vandalism because of the way they cleared that park. Now there were all these arguments that they were too aggressive, that they should not have used this kind of force. Some have even called it unconstitutional.
Pierre, build on that with your own reporting. You spoke to the Attorney General, Bill Barr, this week. Everyone's wondering in Washington, across reporting beats, what exactly was his role in that incident?
Well, he made the case, or tried to make the case, that there were people throwing projectiles, objects at the police, that it was a dangerous situation. The media has pushed back on that, saying that there was little of that, and many people say they didn't see any of it. And so his case to be made was that it was a security issue that needed to be resolved, that he had wanted that park cleared a day earlier. They hadn't gotten around to it. But again, it was a touchstone moment because the crowd was largely peaceful. I think we can all agree with that. And to see those horses and to see the aggressive tactics used by police, it was jolting to a lot of people who believe in the First Amendment and freedom of speech and the freedom to assemble.
Pierre, I just want to follow up on that point. Why is the Attorney General of the United States involved in these sorts of security decisions on Lafayette Square? Why is the Attorney General involved with assembling a security force in the nation's capital with correctional officers from around the country?
Well, I think there are two reasons. Number one, the president wants him to, and he is a law and order attorney general. He has recently spoken about the fact that during the Rodney King tragedy, that he believes that perhaps he should have been more involved in terms of dealing with the onslaught of violent reaction in that city. But at the same time, Barr is a complicated figure. He also is the same attorney general who sought to prosecute and did prosecute the officers who beat up Rodney King in that vicious way. And at the time, that was extremely rare for that to happen, Bob.
Jonathan, I've been following your reporting all week, and on the politics angle of this, you come out of such a great tradition at the New York Times, Johnny Apple, and so many others. When you think about the political side here, what was gained? Was this a president thinking about the campaign and law and order and suburban voters, or something else?
Oh, well, yeah, he had his eye on his reelection, certainly in his comments. And I think he sees an opportunity to try to come across as somebody who is, pushing images off people's televisions that are to some voters frightening. Seeing looting, seeing stores being broken into. And I think Trump has taken it upon himself to think, if I'm the one, the strong man that can sort of come down on that conduct, then I'm going to be, rewarded for it politically. That's a gamble, though, because if people want order, they want stability, they're not looking for a sort of chaotic moment. Well, he's probably not the best candidate given his conduct. And this has always been the challenge with Trump, Bob, is that, even if he's sort of given a political opportunity, he can often be his own worst enemy, given his own rhetoric. And even when he has an opening, he will often forfeit it by making some off-color, incendiary, or offensive comments. And you just look at this past week, and time again, that's what he did.
Amna, when we watch these protests, we pay attention, as we should, to the activism, but also the police forces. And it's not just in Lafayette Square. And I was wondering this week about how do police leaders see this moment? And you spoke to the police chief in Houston. You've spoken to other police and military officials. How are they handling this widespread militarization of police forces, not only in Washington, but across the country?
I think it's two different conversations, right? If you get back to that moment, which was a tipping point in so many ways of the president's walk across Lafayette Square, obviously military officials were troubled enough by that General Milley, who was with him on that walk, felt he needed to issue a statement to all of the armed service members to say, I want to remind you of your constitutional obligation, which is to the Constitution and not to the president. And I think there's been a growing fear within a number of senior military officials that I've talked to that over the last 3.5 years, they have become increasingly used as political tools for the president. Now, on the law enforcement side, you're absolutely right. I talked to the Houston police chief, who himself is a Cuban immigrant. He oversees one of the most diverse communities in America and has been hailed this week because he has been walking with the protesters, leading with empathy, as he told me. At the same time, he is not immune, and his department is not immune from many of the same problems we've seen at police departments across the country. It's worth pointing out that on the same day that George Floyd was killed, the Houston Police Department had its 6th fatal shooting in as many weeks. And that Art Acevedo, the police chief there, even as he's walking with the protesters, is facing tough questions from them about why he won't release some body camera footage. So there are serious questions about previous use of force, about all the uses of force that we don't see caught on camera, but also the use of force in response to these very protests that are against police brutality.